Hey guys, so I'm doing this video here about America's first postage stamp, but first, let's talk about before postage stamps. Before the Post Office Department issued its first postage stamps in 1847, letters were taken to a post office where the postmaster would note the postage in the upper right corner. The postage rate was based on the number of sheets in the letter and the distance it would travel. Postage could be paid in advance by the writer, collected from the addressee on delivery, or paid partially in advance and then partially upon delivery. If prepaid, postmasters marked paid on the letter. Now, back in 1842, a gentleman named Alexander Gregg had a city dispatch post, which was a private New York City carrier. It issued the first adhesive stamps in the United States, believe it or not, February 1st, 1842. Now, the Post Office Department bought Gregg's business that same year and continued to use the stamps for a carrier service in New York City. After U.S. postage rates were simplified in 1845, New York City Postmaster Robert Morris, among others, provided special stamps or markings to indicate the prepayment of postage. These are now known as postmasters' provisionals. Now, in 1847, Congress authorized United States postage stamps. The first general issue postage stamp went on sale in New York City July 1st, 1847. One was priced at 5 cents and it depicted Benjamin Franklin. The other, a 10-cent, pictured George Washington. Clerks used scissors to cut the stamps from pre-gummed, non-perforated sheets. Now, in 1855, the prepayment of letter postage actually became mandatory. Beginning in January 1st, 1856, mailers were required to prepay using U.S. postage stamps. Let's take a look at some websites that I happen to really like. Here we have our two stamps depicted, which I've shown already. They became valid in 1847. I love this. This cover was postmarked the very next day. It also states that the essay vignettes of Franklin and Washington were printed from existing engravings by Asher B. Durand. The frames were drawn in pencil and ink on cardboard. Then a light wash of India ink was brushed on to give it tone. Franklin's stamp paid the rate for 1/2 ounce, sent up to 300 miles. The George Washington stamp paid the rate for longer distances or heavier mail. I love that cover. That's a beauty. Wow. The next day. How about that? And here, this website has a pretty cool map of the United States in 1847. Just look at the divisions here. Amazing. Wow. On June 26th, 1847, printers had advised Postmaster General Johnson that 200,000 10-cent stamps and 600,000 5-cent stamps were ready for delivery. Johnson dispatched a special post office agent, believed to be John Marin, third Assistant Postmaster General, to take delivery of the precious cargo. Marin arrived in New York on June 29th to take possession of the parcel of stamps. Before noon on July 1st, Marin delivered 60,000 5-cent and 20,000 10-cent stamps to Robert Morris, the New York City postmaster. While no cover is known to have been posted at New York on July 1st, the first day of issue, the new stamps were probably available for sale by that afternoon. The earliest known cover bearing one of these stamps was postmarked New York City, July 2nd, 1847, although the stamps were probably purchased on the first day of issue. Then Marin's next stop was Boston, where he delivered 40,000 5-cent and 10,000 10-cent stamps to that city's postmaster on July 2nd. After spending the 4th of July weekend in Boston, Marin returned to New York by rail and coastal steamer, arriving on the 6th. Pushing on, he visited Philadelphia July 7th, leaving 40,000 5-cent and 10,000 10-cent stamps with that city's postmaster. Marin then returned to Washington 2 days later, depositing the rest of the historic first printing at the Post Office Department headquarters. Now, no full sheets of 200 stamps of the 1847 issue are believed to exist today. The largest surviving pieces are 2 panes of 100 original plate proofs, one of the 5-cent stamps in orange brown, the other of the 10-cent in black. Both are marked with overprint specimen. These 2 panes were recently discovered in an American banknote company specimen archival proof book. Wow. Here's some other things that I find interesting personally. It was Benjamin Franklin who created postal routes, implemented mail wagon service, and worked to maintain an inexpensive rate of postage 75 years before the first prepaid stamp. Now, it's interesting that also the private security printer, Rawdon, Wright, Hatch, Edson, and Company, who suggested printing this first stamp in 2 different colors, was denied because the government decided that one color was more cost effective. Now, also, surprisingly, the U.S. Post Office would not make prepaid postage mandatory until 1856. However, the prepaid adhesive postage stamps were a resounding success, and in 1851, more than 1.2 million postage stamps were sold at the post office, and the post office decided to reduce the cost of mailing a letter a distance less than 500 miles to a single penny. This reduction from 5 cents to 1 cent led an astronomical 45-fold increase in volume to 52 million letters in 1852, just 1 year. The use of stamps was optional. Letters could still be sent, requiring payment of postage on delivery. Nevertheless, many Americans took up using stamps. About 3,700,000 of the 5 cent and about 865,000 of the 10 cent were sold. Enough of those have survived to ensure a ready supply for collectors. 1857 saw the introduction of perforation, and in 1860, 24 cent, 30 cent, and 90 cent values were issued for the first time. These higher denominations, especially the 90 cent value, were available for such a short time, just a little over a year, that they had virtually no chance of being used. The 90 cent stamp used is a very rare item, and so frequently forged that authorities counsel collectors to shun canceled copies that lack expert certification. Now, this is just a random website here that I did like. It kind of illustrates the first stamps and then the ones that followed immediately afterwards. So here they talk about the first 2 that were released, which we have been learning about. Then they had, in 1875, a special printing of a reproduction that was a nationwide centennial celebration. I thought that was interesting. I didn't know that. Also, then to follow that, the 1851 to 6 imperforate issues. So in 1851, a new series was introduced to accommodate lower postal rates. New portraits were introduced for Washington and Franklin and Thomas Jefferson. The 1 cent blue Franklin, introduced at this time and then reissued with the 1857 perforated issues, which are listed below, is one of the most thoroughly studied of any stamp. This study has resulted in a large number of recognized variations. The original design for the 1 cent Franklin was slightly too large to fit in a 200 stamp plate. Therefore, various outer elements were trimmed away to squeeze the stamps into the plate. Collectors have identified numerous types of the stamp based on how much of the design was trimmed. Interesting. That explains so many different variations. Any of you out there that have ever bothered to try and identify these, you will know there are many variations. And then they go to talk about how they started perforating stamps in 1857. All the designs from the 1851 were re-released, and they added 3 additional signs. So, interesting little step into the beginning of the U.S. postal history. And that does it for this video. I hope somebody out there enjoyed and maybe learned a thing or two. I always find early U.S. postal history quite fascinating, and for that matter, postal history around the world. Thanks for stopping by, everybody. I hope you enjoyed. Take care. I'll see you later.